Hello, welcome to Gene Keys with Monifa, your path to vocal superpower. This is the series on Gene Keys, and I love the Gene Keys so much, and so I wanted to share it with you guys. The work that I do with the Gene Keys has just changed my absolute life. I've been doing it for about 8 years now, and I'm also a Gene Keys guide. So it's something that I really love to share with people because it's about the energies of just being human. The more that I understand about my profile, the more that I step into my own unique prism of genius. And I am walking others in with me. So if you would like to know what your highlights, your challenges, your superpowers are, then come find me and we will do that journey together. Um, I love to delve into the whole of the system because the more that I understand about the different ways that these energies work together, what's beautiful about them, what can kind of go wrong, so to speak, it's the more that I can fall in love with ourselves and our humanity and the shadow as well as the light because they are both there for a purpose and for your purpose. And as we go through that template, that's when we understand what's behind your unique genius. Anytime we're talking about shadow, just yourself that there's nothing wrong, so that we don't step into shame and guilt about it. And let it teach you how close your gift, your genius is. We are starting with the purpose sphere because the purpose sphere is why we are here, right? Well, I think people get confused with the purpose. They think that it's about what you do, but it isn't. It's who you be. And what the Gene Keys is reminding us is our makeup, it's our literal chemistry, it's how our DNA is put together as to who we are being, how we are shining, why are we here, what are we here in service of, right? And all of that is already part of your makeup, it's already part of your experience. And so when we are really embracing that, um, then we get grounded into what's real and how we can work and act from there. So it's the place I love to start, but it is not the start of the Gene Keys golden path. That path starts in a different area called the activation sequence and then ends up in the purpose sphere. And then it moves into the Venus sequence, which is about love, and then the Pearl sequence, which is about prosperity. So if you want to know more about that, click on the link below for your free Gene Key profile and more information and resources about those sequences. If you want to start that path with me, what you'll want to do is go down and find the vocal superpower chart. So that is essentially how to bring your genius into your self-expression. And that's what I love to do is I love to help you find your authentic and memorable expression in the world, in social media, in visibility, so that you feel natural and that you feel like you're still on purpose and not just another marketing wheel. Each key has three levels. We have the shadow, we have the gift, and the Siddhi, Siddhi. And so the shadow is the expression of the low vibration, is kind of how you can think of it. And it's just what the challenges are, but it is the energy. When we notice the shadow, we can understand that the gift is right around the corner. We just have to walk into it from our new perspective. And so anytime the shadow shows up, the gift is available. And the shadow can show up in reactive or repressed energy. So that's basically acting out or turning it inward and how that looks. And when we can recognize it, it's so powerful. The gift is your genius. So that once we unlock the shadow and the energy and what it's truly trying to show us and what's available to us, then we get the genius of our gift. And then the Siddhi, I think of it as the service to all. It's essentially how that energy shows up in the world. Whether you're noticing it or not, your energy, even when you're acting in your shadow, is living the purpose. And it may not feel good if you're in shadow, but if you're in the gift, we get to witness your own genius. It's so satisfying, so fulfilling. it is true success. Just so you know, this is how I am hearing and seeing the gene keys at any given moment. And so it may look a little different if you hear me describe it somewhere else or in a shorter time frame because there's so many facets to come in on. And as the understanding comes through me, I just let it out. Also, that when you're looking at the gene keys, don't just take the gene keys word for it. If it is in your chart, you understand the energy better than anybody else can understand it that doesn't have that energy, right? And so even when somebody can like kind of reflect your energy, they're not experiencing it on the inside. So you know most of what that is. And so make sure that you're applying the stories of your legend to this understanding. And whether that's your story or stories you have seen appearing in the world, those are both ways of understanding how energy lives and its highest realization. In your free Gene Key hologenetic profile, there is a combination of spheres. And what I call those combination of spheres is your signature vibration. So each sphere obviously has its own energy, but very few people have the same exact same combination of spheres, and zero people have the exact same combinations of spheres with your life experience. This is how we understand ourselves in creation, how we create what we want in the world. And so, if you want to know more about your signature vibration and how to start living it and embodying it and speaking it, then find me and my coursework will start you down that path. Today, we're talking about Gene Key 16, the shadow of indifference, the gift of versatility, and the city of mastery. The original I Ching is the word enthusiasm is the translation. And this is really about how we are connecting to what we have to say, what we want to share with the world, and how we make an impact with that. And how do we align that to our inspiration, our intuition. And this is in astrology is the Gemini sign for degree 5, minute 45, to degree 11, minute 22. So in the shadow of indifference, it just keeps us from seeing the highest possibility. What happens is we get complacent because we don't trust that we can have the highest possibility. And what it requires and what seems to be more difficult in this modern times is to get ourselves out of our comfort zone. We like to stay safe because it's easier, right? And so the more that we are attracted to that comfort zone, the less we have the possibility of moving into something newer, which is usually a new level of prosperity, a new level of excellence. And that is what this key is about. It's about recognizing excellence. So in the shadow, instead of being active and aware of that excellent possibility, we pretend like we don't know, or we hide from our own understanding so that we don't have to hurt to get there or recognize that disparity, which is essentially what what it means to feel uncomfortable and pain and anxiety and all the things, right? So a lot of us creatives are very familiar with that feeling. And in order to step out of the shadow, it takes being able to risk being different. So that's a quote directly from Richard Rudd. We have to risk being different. And what happens when we aren't willing to risk being different? Then we move into this unfocusing. We kind of just try to think about things that aren't important. If we're not kind of constantly being reminded that things are important, that things are important to us, that things are urgent in the areas that apply to us, then we can kind of stay comfortably in our comfort zone in complacency without the anxiety. But what happens is that that feeling kind of backs up, and I'm just talking from personal experience here. I'm very familiar with this key, right? And the opposite of love is not hate. This is a quote as well. It's indifference. The opposite of art is not ugliness, it's indifference. The opposite of faith is not heresy, it's indifference. And the opposite of life is not death, it's indifference. And this is a quote from Ellie Weasel and part of the book as well. And it just reminds me like of my beingness, right? I have a hard time with news. I have a hard time with a lot of ugliness that's constantly shared about humanity in the world. And it tends to bog me down. But if I stay too far removed from it, I get complacent, right? I think that everything's fine and I can feel that way, but it is a shadow of mine, right? And if we let ourselves stay there, we end up sitting on the sidelines of our own show, right? Like because we do have a show. We are the star of our own show. We are the center of our world. We are the god of our circumstance, right? Like so when we sit on the silence of our own show, then who's on stage? Who are we allowing on stage? And how do we let that absolve us from responsibility? Richard Rudd brings up the idea of a social idea of diffusion of responsibility, which is that idea which we've heard of people having being in distress in public and nobody coming to help them. So like somebody's purse gets stolen and there's like 10 people standing around and nobody says anything. Nobody calls 911. Nobody like they just kind of either keep walking or they freeze. And that feeling is that well there's others around and if nobody else knows what to do then I don't have to act either. I don't know don't need to know what to do either, right? Kind of it's kind of this diffusion of responsibility is what it's called. And then it also happens on the large scale, so especially when we get inundated with things like the news, when we get inundated and say, well, you know, if the government can't do anything about it, what the hell can I do? And we just literally do nothing. That's that same shadow. And again, I'm very familiar with this one. That's why I don't watch the news because it makes me so despondent that I don't do anything, including what I can do, which is all that's our responsibility is what we can do. And my little corner of that responsibility is helping others fully realize themselves so that there's never this dissonance that creates the strife, creates the anger, creates the war. It's my little piece of doing my part, right? But if I feel like, oh, there's no way I can fix everything, then I may not do anything. So refused is not doing what you'd love to be doing. So that's from the direct quote from the book as well. So I like that explanation because what that tells you again is like not everything. So it's not you going out and saving the world with a pistol, right? It's you doing what you'd love to be doing is your service to the world. So I love helping people realize the magnitude of their voice and living into that amplification. I love sharing people's genius with people, right? And I love being part of allowing that to be possible. Like that's what I love. So if I'm not doing what I love, then what is possible is not fully being manifested, at least not in my reality. Right. And that's when we get to kind of start noticing more and more what isn't working. It's how we get in these shadow depressions, like of never feeling like we can get out of shadow, right? In order to change that, you have to transmute the fear to overcome the lethargy. So to overcome just whatever, again, which is definitely a default for me when I'm, especially my fight mode is whatever. That's right. It's my escape strategy. So we all have one. We all have these habits. And so one of the habits that's a regular habit that ends up from this shadow is making ourselves a victim of time. So saying that, well, I don't have time to do what I love. I don't have time to do more with what I want. I don't have time to do what I want the way I want to do it, right? This can go down the hill again of shadow. It's really easy because time feels real, right? It's how we organize life, right? And so without it, we feel like there's no possibility. But the problem with that is that as long as we're letting that be the reason, then we stay stuck. And the programming partner, so the other side of this energy, that shadow is a gene key 9, is inertia. That's like a revolving door of, I'm not sure I care. I don't feel like anything can happen. And as long as we're in that cycle, then there's no way to move out of the shadow because we basically don't feel strongly enough to do anything about it, right? So that's why this is enthusiasm. The definition, the quote that I got was, to be enthused, you must actually have an experience rather than simply dreaming about an experience. So what I've noticed is that usually there's kind of two-edged swords to action. So either you're complacent because you need your own restoration and time, or you're complacent because you don't really believe that true change, true impact can be possible. And so you do nothing and you won't have evidence that it's possible until you do something. So the only way out is through, is that idea. So another way that we tend to stay in the shadow and convince ourselves the shadow is real, the only place to be, is to say that we're not ready yet, right? I haven't learned enough. I'm not good enough. I can't do it fancy enough. It's not going to be pretty like the other people do it. Those are reasons why we tend to kind of back off. I want to do it right, right? This is how I first a creative, like all my artists are very familiar with this feeling of wanting it to be more perfect than we feel is possible in the now, right? And the only way you can get through this feeling as well is to do. It's the only way you can do it. And just know that you're perfect now. Like you don't have to be more of anything. Richard Rudd says it like, you're always ready. You're never not ready. You're always ready. You're always perfect for now, what's present and what wants to show up and what's needed by you through you now. There's nothing wrong. There's nothing that has to be fixed. There's nothing that you have to be more of to make an impact now. When you're moving in what you love, that's your talent. And it magnetizes what's needed to make it the complete vision. So that's not to say that when you're going to always be lackluster, right? It's to say that you're going to be at the level you are until you've experienced enough to magnetize what else is joining you in that vision, and that's other people 9 times out of 10. Right. So as you do more people that are aligned to that energy and that vision show up. So that's one of the things, like action is a big piece here in the shadow. It's not always, sometimes it's contemplation. It can be in or out, right? So the repressive side is gullible. So again, this is the side where we become victims to propaganda. So that's social media, that's news, that's culture, that's society. Like, oh, everything's going to hell in a handbasket. What could I do ever that would change that, right? The reactive side in the book is described as also being somewhat repressive, because the reality is if you're in the shadow of this gift, then you're just not in action at all, right? So you can't react because that's would be an action, right? But the way that it's defined is self-deluded. And so it's this feeling of, well, the structure will fix it. So you just find something to believe in that will, the structure, that thing, that tool is going to be the way that something changes. And so it is just forgetting that we're the author of any tool or system or structure, whether it's us or another beautiful human spirit, right? And when we are making the tool the God, so to speak, we're buying into our own propaganda. So it's just a reaction of creating our own falsehoods, our own structure of falsehood. And that's the shadow side. The gift side is versatility. The gift is versatility. When we're in shadow, we have to remember that all energy is kind of cumulative combined energy. And so it's really the lethargy of humanity as a whole that allows all of the wrong things to continue, that gets reflected into our own energy, and then we internalize it and act it out in ourselves, right? So if you feel like it's like you're doing something wrong, which is never true about the shadow, but if you are, this is one of those that especially makes you feel like, oh, this must be me. I'm the only one that feels inept in this environment. I'm the only one not getting things done. I'm the only one, you know, that's kind of how it feels. So when you're just remembering that that is a falsehood, well, it'll start to shift you into your gift. Okay. And the gift side is when we can recognize that we are all one and that we are just an aspect of that oneness. So we're just a part of the whole. And to transcend the general lethargy, right? We have to put ourselves in service to our talent, to the skill, to the understanding. And um, it's not just the skill itself, it's the process of internalizing that skill. It's the spirit that is behind that skill. When we are experiencing that skill without believing that the skill is the one thing, without identifying with it, then so not attaching it to our ego and making it the reason why we're right, but when we are just recognizing the frequency of being in cooperation with the creation, then when we recognize that, that is the gift, the versatility, is being able to exchange any of those skills across the board with any other. So when you're in this gift is the ability to draw on any of the 64 gifts. This also reflects in everything else. In academia, it's any branch of the arts and sciences being interchangeable with any other. This is when you see like the mastery of pulling knowledge and wisdom from multiple sources, arts and science and culture and history and spirituality and all the things. When you start drawing on all the things, we're living into a level of versatility, and that's a frequency. That's when you can recognize that you are in high vibration, that you are in alignment. Okay. And that's when we get the satisfaction. That's when we get the fun. That's when you feel successful. A description in the book is that versatility abhors waste. I love this definition because it reminds me of this feeling of why not use it if it's true of like that what words we're using. If we're talking about shadow, why can't that be the truth of like, this is essentially procrastination. So just because we're not talking about procrastination and apology doesn't make it less true for somebody who's in therapy or psychology, right? So this is also an aspect of being able to draw on more than one mentor. And the perfect example is like the village of raising a child, right? Bringing people together and cultivating an environment, especially for the talents of that child. And if you bring in the right connections, it automatically lifts them to that point of mastery very quickly. The other explanation in the book is having energy systems that support a home or village. So most energy systems are drawing from one source, and they outsource it to wherever it's needed. And so we lose energy in the transference, and we lose time, and we lose the impact or the size of energy when it gets to the source. What would it look like if we're using several different sources? So that looks like having maybe a solar system and maybe some water resource and all of the different ways to do energy to receive energy without having to rely on a grid, so to speak, or the source coming from external to internal to the home, right? And that can be for a home or a village or community. We start to become resourced within our own, we have the ability to share resources, right? And so it becomes a more equitable system. The city of mastery is about being able to take the understanding of developing a skill and make it the understanding of connecting into a system of creation and evolution. It's taking the identity out of the skill process or system and making it the the truth or tapping into the akasha of the mastery itself, the energy of that frequency. And so when I say that service to the world here, I see that playing out as we are the world. So at any given point, whenever you're looking for mastery of something, it is available when we are willing to connect with all, right? And when we are able to be fully resourced within ourselves, is again when we can share our resources with others. So, the last quote I have here is nothing is impossible if you move the mind out of the way. The word enthusiasm derives from the Latin and Greek meaning to be possessed by the breath of God. Line 4 is about the breath. And breath is our anchor to rhythm. When we are witnessing our breath or bringing ourselves into awareness of the rhythm of the cycles of life, you can't live without air, but for so long, it's minutes, as opposed to things like food and water, which are days and months, right? And so when we are allowing that breath to help us find our center and the people with line 4 purposes, it's their proof that they're here for a reason. When they get in sync with their breath, it brings them a sense of vitality and liveliness of resource that may not be familiar for the rest of us. So there's people out there who live and breathe breath work, right? Because it is so much what gives them life. It's just how they are moved into the space in which they share their talent with the world. And so it becomes a vital resource. It's why more and more people are talking about it. This energy is needed, right? How do you know? Because our attention was brought to it through the pandemic. Breathing became something precious in a way that we just haven't perceived up until then, right? And so whenever we have those awakening experiences, it's to remind us where we need to go. We need to get into rhythm. We need to get into breath. We need to understand the extraordinariness of that experience of living in order to be in right relationship and without dissonance, without dis-ease. If you have a fourth line, you should be doing breath practices, especially in this position. If you have the fourth line in your purpose, it's a good idea to start doing some breath work. And what happens is that that ability to sense the movement and the rhythm is what helps you to notice the patterns of life between people and how people move and breathe and be together. Because when we are sharing breath, we are sharing each other's essence. And every time we breathe, we're not just breathing our own air, we're breathing in the air that's been breathed through human beings since the beginning of time, right? And so it connects us to every human being that ever is and ever will be. And it's just this beautiful sense of connection, and we really sit into breath work. And in the fourth line, as it is being expressed with others, it shows up in the shadow as the politician and in the gift as the nurturer. So, in the politician's shadow, the repressive tendency is to be emotionally numb. So basically, not wanting to feel anything. And the reactive tendency is to cut others off in a cruel way. So, not even noticing how others feel when you cut them off from your emotions, right? Because you don't feel anything, you're in that numbness. So, that main block is that you want to reject others before they can reject you. This is also very familiar for me because this is in another key for me of a really important key called the core wound. And so it's a tendency for me to like just turn off. And when I'm turned off, people really notice because when I'm turned on, like I really shine. I really share a lot of love, a lot of light. And when I decide not to do that anymore, it's really evident to people and they think something's wrong or that I no longer care and I'm not willing to experience life with them. It becomes a very emotional thing for everybody involved. And so that's maybe what's happening for you. But check in with yourself and notice the patterns that may have happened within around you. Do people feel highly, like they have strong reactions when you just want some time alone? And that may be how it's showing up. On the nurturer side, on the gift side, the strength is being gentle with yourself. On the outer strength side, it's connecting deeply with others. And the highest potential, your generous spirit enables others to accept themselves. It's this feeling of being fully okay with yourself and your flaws and just allowing yourself to be, right? The more you accept yourself as yourself, the more gentle you are with your perceived flaws and beingness, the more people feel like they can be themselves with you, the more there's a true, authentic connection. And so it's this beautiful way in which your energy, just the beingness, just who you are, not what you do, but you be, enables others to accept themselves as they are. You see how that torch is passed? So when these are working together, we got the 16th key in its shadow of indifference and just not wanting to connect at all, right? Like it's this feeling of, well, I don't want to know, so I don't have to feel the pain. I don't want to know, so I don't have to feel inept. Right? This indifference of whatever, nothing else is possible. And reflecting into this fourth line is like for reject everything. Like don't let anything in, because it's just gonna remind you. That's how it comes. Like the extreme level here is, everything's gonna remind you that you're ineffectual. Right? It's kind of the direness of the situation here in the shadow. And as you start to realize that we are all connected, that we're all having this sense, but we all have this also untapped energy. One of the beautiful things about the fourth line in a lot of the spheres is just this ability to see people and see the potential in others. So if you can see it in others, it is in you. Then that's where we start to move into the gift of recognizing we are all one and that it was possible for others or it's possible for ourselves. And if that's true, we can choose the highest version of that and the version we connect with the most. And in that Siddhi, right, that 64, that we know what that is. We can tap into that energy. We can tap into that feeling and allow it to move through us at that highest level. So are we choosing it? Are we staying in inertia? Is the question of key 16, line 4. If you're enjoying Gene Keys with Monifa, please do go ahead and subscribe. Just click the button and I'll see you on the next video. I do take recommendations and I'm get back in my schedule in which I can do these more. And so if you want your own Gene Key in line in your purpose key, just fill out the form below. Thank you so much for joining me with Gene Keys and Monifa, and I will see you on the next key. And now I'll do a vocal contemplation on Gene Key 16, line 4.